Before we begin, I want to ask you one simple question. What if the greatest human strength is not conquering a world, but staying long enough to heal one? In this story, an alien archivist arrives on a planet everyone once called a failure. What she finds there will change the way her people understand humanity forever. Now, let's begin. Archivist Sira Vin landed on Kepler Rain because a map had told a lie. That was what she believed at first. Her shuttle cut through gray clouds and descended toward a planet the old files had marked as a failure. Kepler Rain had never been known for beauty. It was known for corrosion, thin soil, poison water, and a slow silver rain that wore down metal if no one cleaned it away. The planet sat on a minor trade route, far enough from power to be ignored, but close enough to be used when stronger worlds ran out of room. Sira was not a soldier or a colonist. She was an archivist from the Interworld Record Office, trained to preserve facts after politics had finished bending them. Her task was simple. Sector K-17, an abandoned human resettlement site, had appeared on a new ecological survey as a stable green zone. The result contradicted every historic model. Her director had called it a sensor error. Confirm the glitch, Director Valerin had told her. Do not reopen a century of settlement arguments over a faulty scan. Sira had agreed. Then her shuttle dropped below the cloud layer, and the error became a forest. It spread across a valley of black stone beneath a web of clear, sheltering domes. Terrace fields curved along the slopes. Water shone in narrow canals. Tall fruit trees rose where the old records showed acidic dust. Warm lights glowed from a town built under glass and silver supports. Rain struck the dome above it and slid away in bright streams. The navigation display named the place Rowanstead. The old file still named it Sector K-17. The first name sounded like a home. The second sounded like a place no one expected to remember. Sira ordered the shuttle to circle once before landing. From above, she saw wind towers patched with old metal, filtration ponds, greenhouses, and low houses joined by covered paths. She also saw a gate near the oldest dome. Its frame was made from the hull plating of a transport ship. The letters were weathered, but still readable. Broken Farm. Sira repeated the words under her breath. They did not match the forest, the water, or the children of 4 species running under the transparent roof below. When she stepped from the shuttle, the air smelled of wet stone, leaf oil, and clean soil. That last scent made her stop. Kepler Rain's native soil was sour and metallic. It did not smell like life. Yet here it did. An old alien waited near the landing path. His name was Kethoran. His skin had the pale copper color of his people, and his 4 narrow arms were wrapped in a farmer's coat patched at the elbows. He leaned on a cane carved from dark wood. You are the archivist, he said. I am Sira Ven, she replied. I came to inspect the ecological anomaly. Keth smiled without humor. That is what outsiders call it. What do you call it? He looked past her toward the fields. A long answer. He led her beneath the main dome. Rain hammered softly overhead. The sound was constant, but not harsh. It was like thousands of small fingers tapping a roof that refused to break. Beneath it, people worked with quiet confidence. A human woman guided water through a stone channel. A blue-skinned child carried trays of seedlings. 2 older aliens repaired a cracked support beam, while a human man held the ladder. Sira saw no miracle machine. No central terraforming engine. No massive reactor. Nothing that could explain how dead ground had become a living settlement. This site was listed as unrecoverable, she said. Keth nodded. It was. The early reports claimed the humans failed in the first season. They did. Then how is this here? Keth stopped beside a row of low trees. Their trunks twisted around support frames, and their leaves were thick, pale green, and glossy with filtered rain. He touched one leaf with surprising gentleness. If you want the answer, he said, do not start with the forest. Start with the people who stayed when there was no forest. He took her to the archive house, a small building near the old gate. Inside, sealed cases held tools, seed trays, rain-burned gloves, patched water filters, and handwritten journals. On the center wall hung a photograph printed on fiber paper. It showed a middle-aged human man standing in gray mud under a torn greenhouse roof. His hair was dark thin, his face lined by sun and weather. He held a dead plant in one hand and a tray of seedlings in the other. Below the photograph was a name: Elias Rowan. Sarah opened the official file on her wrist screen. The old summary described him as a male human agricultural laborer with moderate technical rating, low strategic value, and uncertain adaptive usefulness. She looked at the photograph again. The man did not look uncertain. Tired, yes. Worn down, yes. But not uncertain. Who wrote this assessment? She asked. Overseer Thalen, or, Keth said. He assigned the land. Sarah searched deeper. Some pages opened. Others were sealed under obsolete administrative locks. But enough appeared to shift the room around her. Sector K-17 had not been given to the humans by chance. It had been selected because it was the least valuable settlement zone remaining. The soil had failed 7 prior restoration attempts. The water table was contaminated. The protective dome had been cracked before the humans arrived. The assignment notes described the human group as a useful stress case for resettlement limits. A stress case, not a community, not families, not people. Sarah felt the first uncomfortable pressure of the investigation settle behind her ribs. Keth, watch her read. Now you see the beginning. I see a bad allocation decision, Sarah said, because that was the safe language of archives. No, Keth said softly. You see a verdict written before the trial. Sarah kept reading, and the old records carried her back to the first year. 100 years earlier, Elias Rowan stepped down from a transport ramp and tasted metal in the rain. The drops struck the edge of his hood and smoked faintly where they touched the old paint on the cargo crates. Behind him, 47 humans waited in silence. Some were farmers, some were mechanics, some were cooks, teachers, and tired parents who had signed resettlement contracts because Earth had more people needing land than land needing people. Kepler Rain had been described to them as difficult, not hopeless. Sector K-17 showed them the difference. The greenhouse roof was cracked like broken ice. The water tanks leaned on sinking legs. The wind tower turned only when the gusts were strong enough to make it scream. The soil beyond the shelter was pale gray, hard in some places, powder in others, and streaked with orange mineral stains. Overseer Thalen stood beneath a sealed canopy and spoke as if he were giving them a gift. This sector has been assigned for human agricultural adaptation, he said. Your species has a reputation for aggressive environmental use. If productive output can be achieved here, the council will review future allocations. Elias heard the insult inside the formal words. So did the others. Mara Rowan, his grown daughter, stood beside a crate of tools with her jaw tight. She had her mother's dark eyes and her father's habit of saying little when anger would only waste strength. A young alien ecologist knelt, tested the soil with a probe, and clicked his tongue. Root death within hours for most standard crops, he said. Possibly days for hardier strains. Nothing useful without major intervention. One of the humans whispered, "They gave us a grave." Elias walked past the ecologist and crouched at the edge of the first field. He pulled off one glove and pressed his fingers into the soil. It stung. Not badly, but enough to warn him. He lifted a handful. The soil clumped wrong. Too much salt. Too much metal. Too little organic matter. Dead soil, but not empty soil. The ecologist watched him. Human, that ground will not even feed weeds. Elias turned the dirt in his palm. Then we start smaller than weeds. No one cheered. It was not that kind of moment. A cheering crowd would have been a lie. They were afraid. Elias was afraid too. But fear did not repair a roof, and speeches did not make water clean. He stood and pointed to the cracked dome. Nora, check the roof ribs. Sam, open the seed lockers and sort what is dry from what is lost. Mara, get 6 people on the tanks. We need to know what leaks before dark. Nora Hale, their best mechanic, stared at the wind tower. That thing should have been scrapped 20 years ago. Then it will be grateful for attention, Elias said. That got the first tired laugh. For 3 weeks, they worked as if motion itself could keep despair away. They sealed cracks with resin older than the children carrying it. They cleaned filters and built raised beds from cargo panels. They scraped organic waste into compost pits and mixed it with dead soil. Sam Reed, who could coax life from almost anything, sorted the surviving seeds with a tenderness usually reserved for newborn animals. When the first green points broke the soil, people came quietly to look. A few smiled. One woman cried and pretended she had gotten rain in her eyes. Then the weather changed. The storm arrived at night. Wind shoved the dome until its old joints groaned. Rain fell harder than any report had promised. In the morning, the first greenhouse smelled sour. Water had leaked through 3 roof seams. Leaves had curled black along the edges. By midday, most of the seedlings were gone. Mara stood ankle-deep in muddy runoff, staring at the dead trays. This was never a settlement, she said. It was a disposal site with paperwork. Elias did not answer right away. He walked the rows, lifting each tray, checking for anything green. At the far end, under an overturned support board, he found 7 seedlings still alive. Barely alive, but alive. He carried the tray back. Mara looked at it like it had insulted her. 7 plants do not feed 48 people. No, Elias said, but they tell us where the roof failed. Nora wiped rainwater from her face. You are making failure sound useful. It is useful if we do not waste it. That night, Mara found Elias in the temporary shelter they shared. Water dripped through the ceiling into 3 pots. His hands were wrapped because the soil had burned the cracks in his skin. You cannot keep doing this, she said. I can keep doing tomorrow. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. Mara sat across from him. The storm beat on the roof, and for a while they were just 2 people, listening to a planet try to enter their house. On Earth, she said, you stayed too long on the old farm. You kept saying, one more season, one more repair, one more loan. Then we lost it anyway. Elias looked down at his bandaged hands. The old farm had been dry, not poisoned. Brown fields under a hard blue sky. His wife had still been alive then. They had fought drought, debt, and bad luck until the bank took the land and called it an economic correction. Elias had left with tools, seeds, and the shame of someone who knew effort did not always win. I remember, he said. Then why are you doing it again? Because this time no one has taken it from us yet. Mara's voice broke into anger because fear needed somewhere to go. This place does not love us back. Elias nodded. No, it does not know how. That is not how places work. Maybe not. He looked at the leaking ceiling. But I know what it feels like to be called worthless by someone who already decided not to help. I will not say it to this land until I have done more than arrive and complain. Mara stood, frustrated and tired. You're going to get people killed for dirt. Elias did not raise his voice. No, I'm trying to keep them alive past the next supply drop. That means the dirt has to live too. She left before she could answer. The next morning, she still came to work. The archive moved forward from the first failed crop to the first real lesson. The first mistake the humans made was trying to turn Kepler Rain into Earth. The second mistake, Elias decided, would be refusing to learn from the first. On Earth, soil had memory. It remembered leaves, roots, insects, waste, rain, and time. Kepler Rain soil remembered acid and metal. If they forced crops into it, the roots died. If they washed it too hard, it collapsed into lifeless dust. If they covered it completely, it grew sour beneath the tarp. So Elias stopped asking what the land lacked and began asking what it was already doing to survive. Sam Reed found the first answer under black stone after a storm. It looked like a stain at first, a dull green film clinging to cracks where runoff collected. The alien. Records identified it as a low-value moss-like growth, non-productive, and not recommended for restoration investment. Sam disagreed. It is alive after the rain, he told Elias. That means it knows something. Nora ran water through a tray of the moss and tested the runoff. Less acidic, she said, surprised. Not clean, but less angry. Ellerin Voss, a local alien technician assigned to monitor them, folded his long arms. That moss has been studied. It grows too slowly for industrial restoration. Elias looked at the thin green film. Good thing we are not an industry. They began protecting the moss. Not much at first. A few shaded beds. A few stones arranged to slow the runoff. They mixed dead soil with compost, moss scrapings, and fungal threads found near old rock roots. They planted in narrow strips instead of open fields. They stopped calling native growth contamination. Progress came so slowly it almost looked like failure. A bed that had killed seedlings in 1 day began killing them in 5, then in 10. Then one stubborn bean plant lived long enough to flower, though the flower fell off before fruiting. Elias marked each failure on a wall chart. Mara saw the chart and shook her head. Most people mark success. Failure is more generous, he said. It gives details. The next record moved to the dry season, when Broken Farm had to choose what survival really meant. The dry season came short and harsh. The main filter failed on the 4th day. Water reserves dropped, and people rationed drinking water. Children were told not to wash unless the dust burned. A fever moved through one shelter, not deadly, but enough to frighten everyone. Ellerin gave the practical recommendation: suspend all plant watering until human reserves stabilize. Several colonists agreed. Mara agreed too. Her friend had a sick father, and the man needed clean water. Elias listened to everyone before speaking. We keep most for people, but the moss beds and the surviving seed rows need a small share. A woman at the back snapped. You want to water plants while people are thirsty? No, Elias said. I want people to be alive next month. Plants do not matter if we die this week. They matter if we live this week and have nothing left after. The argument lasted an hour. No one enjoyed it. No one felt noble. The final decision was ugly and careful. Most of the water stayed with the people. A small portion went to the moss beds, the seed rows, and the new filtration trench. Mara carried one of the water canisters herself. Her face was hard. She poured the measure amount slowly and would not look at Elias. This had better be worth it, she said. It may not be, Elias answered. She turned on him. That is supposed to comfort me? No, it is supposed to be honest. The moss survived. 3 seed rows did not. 1 did. On the 17th day of the next rain cycle, the whole settlement gathered around a single plant. It was not impressive. Its stem bent under its own weight. Its leaves were pale and curled. It had no fruit, no flower, and no beauty that would make a picture worth saving. But it had lived through 17 days of Kepler rain under a roof patched with resin, fabric, and human stubbornness. No one touched it. Keth, then a young laborer from a neighboring alien camp, had come to trade scrap seals for filter cloth. He stood at the back and laughed. You stare at a sick plant like it is a holy object. Sam bristled, but Elias raised a hand. It is not holy, Elias said. It is a witness. To what? To the fact that the planet said no a little less loudly this time. Keth laughed again, but softer. That evening, Mara returned alone to the greenhouse. Elias saw her from the doorway. She had taken a strip from her own scarf and tied it around a seam where rain mist slipped through. The cloth was not much protection. It would need replacing by morning. But she tied it anyway. Elias did not speak. Some choices broke if named too soon. Months became years by way of small repairs. The first true harvest could fit in 2 baskets. People lined up for spoonfuls of soup flavored with vegetables that had cost them nearly everything. No one said it was delicious. It tasted sharp and thin. They ate slowly anyway. The second harvest filled 12 baskets. The third filled a room. By then, the official reports had changed. Done. Overseer Thalen, or no longer called Broken Farm, a likely failure. He called an inefficient but notable anomaly. When the first independent water sample showed reduced metal content, he called it a local effect. When the moss trenches spread beyond the first dome, he called it a site requiring administrative review. A century later, Siraven paused at that phrase in the archive house. Administrative review. It was the language officials used when something they had dismissed became too real to ignore. The next record began with the storm that nearly ended Broken Farm. It came the 12th year. By then, the settlement had become almost believable. There were 3 connected greenhouses, 2 filtration ponds, a working wind tower, and a central seed vault built from a buried cargo container. Children who had arrived as toddlers now knew which leaks mattered and which could wait. Mara ran the greenhouse crews. Nora kept the filters alive by methods no manufacturer would admit were possible. Sam Reed had become the quiet keeper of every seed that had adapted, survived, or surprised them. Elias had more gray in his beard and a permanent stiffness in his hands. The weather warning arrived 6 hours late. Ellerin read the numbers twice. This storm is larger than the models. Nora looked up through the dome. The models have been insulting us for years. The first wave hit after sunset. Rain slammed the roof hard enough to turn conversation into gestures. The main dome held. The second did not. A fracture split across the seed vault greenhouse. An acid mist began to spray through. If the seed stock died, Broken Farm would lose years. Not one crop. Years. The emergency shutters jammed. Nora swore, then apologized to no one. We do not have enough panels. Elias looked toward the residential row. The houses were roofed with scavenged plating, transport doors, and old insulation sheets. They were not ideal, but they were enough to keep families dry. He started toward his own house. Mara stepped in front of him. For a moment, she was 20 years younger in his mind, angry in a leaking shelter, telling him this place did not love them back. Then she lifted a pry bar. We start with mine, she said. Elias stared at her. She did not soften. Move, Dad. By midnight, half the settlement was on the roofs. Humans pulled panels from their own homes. Ellerin and Keth helped carry them through the rain under insulated tarps. Sam and the younger crews sealed the seed vault. Nora climbed the frame in a storm harness and bolted plates over the spreading crack while rain hissed against her sleeves. Families slept that night under roofs with holes in them. The seed vault stayed dry. In the morning, the settlement looked wounded. Rooms were soaked. Tools were ruined. People were exhausted. But inside the central greenhouse, the seed trays sat untouched beneath a patched roof made from pieces of private homes. Keth stood beside Mara and looked at the work. Your houses are damaged, he said. Mara wiped rain from her face. Yes, for seeds. For every meal after us. He did not laugh this time. The archive moved forward again, from the storm to the first clean water. Weeks later, the filtration trench that Elias had argued to water during the dry season began feeding a narrow stone channel. The water came out clear enough to test, then clear enough to boil, then clear enough to drink after final filtering. Elias carried the first sealed sample to the administrative station where Thalen waited. The overseer looked older too, though his uniform remained perfect. He read the analysis, then read it again. Localized improvement, he said. It is water, Elias answered. Not at settlement scale. Not yet. Thalen's mouth tightened at the word. He did not drink the sample Elias offered. He set it on the table as if it might accuse him. Syrah, watching the old footage generations later, replayed that moment 3 times. She had expected triumph. Instead, she saw something more revealing. Thalen was not unmoved. He was afraid. If the water was real, then his original report was wrong. If his report was wrong, then the humans had not failed to understand the land. His office had failed to understand the humans. After the water came people. The first alien family arrived from North Sill, a neighboring settlement where the pumps had gone. Bad. Then 2 more came. Then workers who had once mocked Broken Farm asked for temporary shelter. They came thin, bitter, embarrassed, and afraid of being refused. Elias met them at the old gate. Keth was among them, carrying a bundle and looking anywhere but at Elias. We can work, Keth said. We do not ask charity. Elias looked at the line of people behind him. Good. There's always work. That was all. No event. No lecture. No reminder of laughter at a sick plant. Broken Farm grew because it let others enter. The archive shifted again from refuge to the fight for control. That was when the Restoration Council arrived. They came in clean vehicles with clean boots and a legal claim. Broken Farm, they announced, had become a planetary ecological asset. Its systems, seed stock, water methods, and land management should be placed under central authority for the good of Kepler Rain. Your contribution will be recorded, said Councillor Neshvar. a polished alien with a voice like cool glass. But this site is too important for local control. Elias stood before the council under the old gate. Mara stood beside him. Nora, Sam, Ellerin, and Keth stood behind them with dozens of others. The forest was still small, but it moved in the wind behind the dome like a breathing thing. Neshvar asked for documented ownership. Elias gave him the original allocation papers. Temporary labor settlement, Nesh said. Not permanent land grant. Mara took a step forward, but Elias touched her arm. He looked at the council. When we arrived, you called this land valueless. The status of the land has changed. No, Elias said. The land was changed. By a program under planetary authority. By hands you did not count. Nesh's eyes narrowed. Emotion is not title. Elias nodded. Then record labor. Record the roofs we took off our homes to save seed you did not send. Record the water we did not drink. Record the dead we buried here, because leaving was easier and we did not take easier. Record every layer of soil we carried by hand, because the machines failed and no one replaced them. The council chamber had no answer ready for that, because law often moved poorly when faced. With truth spoken plainly, Elias did not ask to own Kepler Rain. He asked for Broken Farm to remain under the care of the community that had kept it alive when no one else wanted responsibility for it. The first vote failed. The second was delayed. The third passed only after Keth and Ellerin gave witness, and after Mara presented the storm records showing which homes had been stripped to save the seed vault. The council granted Broken Farm protected community stewardship, not ownership in the old sense. Something better, Elias said. A promise recognized. When the old council record ended, Sira was back under the glass roof of Rowanstead. She sat for a long time in the archive house. Rain traced shining lines down the glass above her. Outside, Rowanstead moved through its ordinary morning. Someone repaired a water gate. Someone laughed near the fruit sheds. A group of alien children followed a human teacher between rows of trees whose species had not existed when Elias Rowan first held dead soil in his hand. Keth waited across from her. You knew him? Sira asked. I knew him after I stopped laughing. What changed? Keth folded his lower hands over the cane. My settlement lost water in the 31st year. We had mocked them. We had refused to share parts when they needed them. Some of us had voted to let the council take their farm. He looked toward the window. When our pumps failed, Broken Farm opened its gate. Elias ordered that. Mara did. Elias was already ill by then, but it was his farm in her by then. Sira understood what he meant. Not possession. Inheritance of habit. Did they ask anything in return? Work, Keth said. Not payment. Not apology. Work. They said if we drank the water, we helped keep it clean. If we ate from the soil, we helped feed it. I thought that was punishment at first. And later I understood it was belonging. Keth led her to the oldest part of the town, where the first cargo container still served as a seed vault. It had been cleaned and sealed, but no one had polished away the scratches. Inside, Sira found Elias Rowan's final journal. The pages were plain. No heroic declaration. No grand theory of human endurance. Elias had written about practical things. The north roof needed a new brace. The moss trench near the east pond was spreading well. Mara argued that the orchard rows should turn with the slope, and she was probably right. Sam's new graft had survived. Nora's hands hurt in the cold. Keth had learned to prune too aggressively, but was improving. Near the end, the handwriting grew slower. Sira read the last entry aloud. We did not fix this world in our lifetime. We only taught it to trust hands again. If that is enough, let whoever comes next be gentle. Keth bowed his head. Sira felt something in her professional training give way. Archives were supposed to preserve what happened. They were not supposed to apologize. Yet every file she had read now felt like a room where an apology had waited too long. She returned to the Interworld Record Office with mud on her boots and 300 years of policy language in her case. Director Vailrun was not pleased. You were asked to confirm ecological data, he said. I did. Your report includes administrative misconduct, suppressed allocation bias, disputed stewardship law, and cultural reassessment. Yes, you understand what that will reopen. Sierra thought of the gate that still said Broken Farm. She thought of a man crouching in dead soil, while experts called him low value. She thought of families taking roofs from their own homes so seeds would live. She thought of clear water in a place where no model had expected it. I understand what was closed too early, she said. The official hearing lasted 6 hours. Council members questioned her methods, her sources, and her interpretation. They tried to reduce Broken Farm to a case of local adaptation. They praised the humans in vague language that cost nothing. They called the old allocation unfortunate, but normal for its era. Sierra let them speak. Then she played the footage of the first storm, the failed crop, the water vote, the seed vault night, the first clean water, the council claim, and Keth's testimony. She did not add music. She did not raise her voice. The records were enough. When the hearing ended, the old classification was removed. The file had once called the human settlers extractive risk labor. Sierra replaced it with a longer truth. The human settlement at Broken Farm demonstrated long care, survival behavior under hostile ecological, political, and material pressure. The settlers did not restore Sector K-17 through superior machinery or rapid extraction. They altered the site through repeated low-scale care, intergenerational labor, adaptive observation, and communal sacrifice. Their work expanded beyond human survival and became a refuge for multiple species. At the bottom, she added a personal note, unusual for an official archive, but not forbidden. Do not measure humans only by what they take when they are afraid. Measure them by what they keep caring for when no reward comes back. Years later, students would read that line and argue over whether it was too poetic for a government record. Sierra hoped they would. Arguments kept records alive. On Kepler Rain, the rain still fell. It still struck the domes with a sound like silver fingers. It still stained unprotected stone. It still reminded every generation that the planet had never become easy. But under the old glass, the forest kept growing. Elias Rowan lived long enough to see the first open-air grove survive outside, the main dome, under a web of living moss and filtered runoff. She did not call it victory. She said the land was learning. Nora's patched wind tower became the base of school. Sam's seed notes became the first Rowanstead field guide. Keth taught pruning badly for several years, and then well for many more. And Elias Rowan's name remained carved into the gate, not above the others, but among them. That mattered. He had not saved Kepler Rain alone. He would have hated any story that said he had. One human hand had touched the first dead soil, but many hands had stayed. That was what the old records had missed. That was what the aliens had not known how to measure. There was one more record Sierra almost left out. It was not official. It had no seal, no signature, and no clean date stamp. Someone had recorded it on a kitchen wall during the 22nd year of Broken Farm, when the settlement had enough food to stop. Starving, but not enough to feel safe. In the recording, Elias Rowan was older than the man in the first photograph, but not yet old. He stood at a long table while children sorted seeds into bowls. Rain rattled on the roof. Mara was beside him, correcting a child who had mixed the dry seeds with the damp ones. A young alien from North Sill asked why the humans still save seeds that looked weak. Mara answered first, because weak is not the same as finished. Elias smiled at that. It was a small smile, almost hidden. Then he picked up one wrinkled seed and placed it in the child's palm. On Earth, he said, we learned that the thing you save today may save someone else after you are gone. That is farming. Most people think it is about food. It is not only food. It is memory with roots. The child asked if seeds remembered. Elias said, not the way we do, but they carry what survived. That is a kind of remembering. Sierra watched the clip twice, then a third time. That was the part the early reports had never understood. They had measured yield, failure rate, water cost, medical strain, and labor efficiency. They had measured everything except the habit that made the numbers change over time. Humans carried survival forward. They took a lesson learned in pain and hid it inside the next ordinary task. A patched roof became a rule for the next roof. A failed crop became a better trench. A ration argument became a community vote. A strip of cloth tied over a leak became a daughter deciding to stay. Nothing vanished if someone remembered how to use it. That was why Broken Farm did not collapse when Elias grew sick. By then, the work no longer depended on one man. Mara knew the greenhouses. Nora knew which machines could be trusted and which ones needed to be threatened with a wrench. Sam knew the seed lines by scent and color. Keth knew where the water turned sour before the instruments did. Children knew to listen for roof tones during hard rain because the wrong pitch meant a seam was opening. The aliens had waited for a human miracle. They missed the human method. It was repetition with affection. It was care passed from hand to hand until it became culture. When Sierra's revised archive spread through the network, other worlds responded in ways no council predicted. A mining moon with poisoned dust asked Rowanstead for moss trench designs. A refugee station requested seed vault protocols. A desert colony asked how to build community stewardship into law. Rowanstead sent diagrams, but also sent the stories behind them, because Mara Rowan had insisted on one rule before she died. Never send the method without the reason. So the packets included Elias's first soil notes. They included Nora's warning that machines break faster when no one feels responsible for them. They included Sam's drawings of root damage. They included Keth's confession that he had laughed at the first plant and spent the rest of his life making up for it. Some worlds ignored the stories and copied only the tools. Their projects worked for a while, then failed when maintenance became boring. Other worlds read the stories and understood the harder lesson. A restore place was not a product. It was a relationship that had to be renewed when no one was watching. Years after her first visit, Sierra returned to Kepler Rain for the dedication of the open-air grove. The ceremony was modest because Rowanstead disliked expensive gestures. There were no military banners, no heroic statues, and no polished speeches about destiny. There was only a path of dark stone, a ring of young trees, and a bench made from the last broken panel of the original greenhouse. On the bench was a carved line from Elias Rowan's journal. "Let whoever comes next be gentle." Sierra stood in the rain shelter beside Keth's grandchildren and Mara's grandchildren, though the word grandchildren meant different things among the species gathered there. A human child asked why the old gate still said Broken Farm when the farm was no longer broken. An alien teacher answered before Sierra could, because names can remember what pride forgets. Sierra liked that answer. Beyond the shelter, the first grove stood without glass over it. Rain touched the leaves directly. Some drops still burned small marks into the older growth. Kepler Rain had not become kind. It had become possible. That difference mattered. Humans, Sierra had learned, did not require a place to be perfect before they loved it. Sometimes they loved it by helping it become possible. As the rain softened, a worker opened a channel and let filtered water run toward the new roots. No one applauded. It was just a task. A simple movement of a hand, a gate, a stream, and a future. Sierra watched the water move and thought of the first line in the old file. Human agricultural laborer. Strategic value low. She wondered how many histories began that way, with someone powerful looking at a person who knew how to care for things and mistaking them for unimportant. That was the final change she made to the archive before she retired. She created a new classification, not for humans alone, but first because of them. Long-care civilizations. The definition was short. A long-care civilization is one whose greatest works may appear small at the beginning, because they are designed to outlive the first hands that start them. Under the first example, she entered a place once known as Sector K-17. Then she wrote its true name, Broken Farm. Sierra did not add a statue to the archive. She did not need one. The record ended with the sound of rain on glass, the murmur of people working, and a wide image of the valley Elias Rowan had first entered with damaged tools and a stubborn refusal to call dead soil worthless. That was enough. Any species could build a monument after victory. The humans of Broken Farm had done something stranger. They built a home before victory existed, and then kept repairing it until the world around it changed shape. They did not conquer Kepler Rain. They stayed with it. They learned from moss that experts had dismissed. They shared water when water was scarce. They protected seeds when roofs were failing. They opened the gate to people who had mocked them. Elias Rowan did not live long enough to see the whole forest. Most of the first settlers did not. But they left proof that a broken place is not always finished. Sometimes it is only waiting for hands patient enough to care for it. And that was what the aliens finally understood. Humans are not different because every world welcomes them. Humans are different because when a world gives them nothing back at first, some of them still kneel down, touch the broken ground, and ask what it needs next. If this story stayed with you, please give it a like, share it with someone who loves thoughtful science fiction, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about what makes humanity different among the stars. Your support helps these stories keep growing, one listener at a time. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again in the next journey.